Well, you know the thing about eating by yourself. You're faced with the choice in the kitchen. Do you make the whole meal? Do you have fun? And do you make it with just as much love and care as you would if you were cooking for somebody special? That somebody special is you, after all. But it is at least arguable, and our next guest is going to argue as much, that if you are eating with other people, you're going to choose something different to what you would choose if you're eating alone. And here we have an entire large nation about to gorge itself silly in the celebration of Thanksgiving. But we're coming right along, starting to think about Christmas dinner, of course. And it may be particularly the case when it comes to dessert. Professor Hantat Kay from Monash University has been looking at this all. Hello, Professor Kay.
Good day.
Good day.
I presume it's morning in London?
Yeah, I believe it's dark. Good and dark, anyway.
Right.
So the point that you're making here is that if you're eating on your own, are you eating better?
Well, that's a very good point to make. But really, the research that we examined was trying to understand how nostalgia influences indulgent food consumption. So, nostalgia is harking back to the past and often with fondness. And we find that, nostalgia often evokes a sense of social connectedness, whereby the individual would think about, their favorite people or people that they grew up with, their friends, their family, relatives, etc., etc. And particularly during festivities, so occasions like Christmas, for example, the family would gather, the friends would gather, and oftentimes they would tend to overeat. So this is driven predominantly by the fact that they are with people that they are familiar with, that they're comfortable with. Therefore, they tend to have a good time. And when the food comes along, they would be talking and catching up with old times, and at the same time consuming foods. As opposed to when such people are eating with strangers or by themselves, then there wouldn't be such familiarity, and they would be watching their food more rather than the bonhomie that comes along with being with close ones.
I see. I was listening to a discussion this morning which claimed that Americans only really started to associate the turkey with Thanksgiving at the end of World War II. It was a part of a sort of the GIs are coming home and a warmth of affection for getting the family together, which interested me that it wasn't an older thing. But if what you say is right, I mean, a lot of people wouldn't choose to eat turkey anyway, but they eat turkey out of a sense of camaraderie and almost national unity.
Yes, it is a special occasion for the Americans. So for them, Thanksgiving is associated with particular foods. In this case, the stuffed turkey. And again, this is not something that they would be eating on a daily basis or regularly, but because the occasion calls for it, and therefore they would partake in such delicacies, if you like, or indulgence. And one would hardly think that if one is celebrating Thanksgiving by oneself, then one would also be eating a calf turkey. And this is more likely to happen when there's family around or friends that you haven't seen for a long time. They all gather together in the backyard, for example, and that's when such indulgences often take place.
You did a lot on ice cream. Why did you zero in on ice cream?
Well, we were actually trying to test whether it is true that people would tend to choose more of the indulgent version of a particular food. So in one of the experiments that we conducted, we were comparing between a rich ice cream, very tasty, versus one that is low-fat in nature. And when we found that when we primed in nostalgia, meaning that we asked people to think about, the good times they had, early on in their lives, then they were more, they will be more willing to take the indulgent ice cream rather than one that is the healthier version.
And you tested this also in China with a different dish.
Correct. So we ran several experiments. The ice cream one was one of them, and for the Chinese participants, we gave them two different choices of foods. One was sashima, which is kind of a sticky sweet dessert, and the other being wheat biscuits. And we primed nostalgia by showing them pictures of old China from the 70s and 60s, and those people who saw those images of old China, we found that a higher proportion of them chose sashima, whereas those who saw pictures of modern-day China with their high-rises and bullet trains, etc., they were the ones that chose the healthier version.
So if we come back to this marvelous laboratory, which is, the American nation on Thanksgiving Day, if you show them this parade of balloons and so on, assuming these balloons get off the ground, and football games, this primes their appetite, does it, for all the sweet delights that they're about to eat?
Yes, that is what we're proposing. And to some extent, we found that, that is the case, at least for the experiments that we ran.
Yeah. Did you do any other experiments? Tell us about some of your other lovely experiments that you did.
Well, in this study, we found so we conducted 3 experiments altogether. The one that you mentioned was about the ice cream choice, and the third study that we conducted was about the role of the eating companions. So we wanted to show that nostalgia worked through the feeling of social connectedness. So we found that even if we were to prime, let's say, the participants with images of the past to increase the feeling of nostalgia, but if we said that they were dining alone versus dining with friends or colleagues, or family, then they were still less likely to choose the indulgent food version. So in one of these experiments, the third one that we ran, we talked about them having a meal and then followed by dessert. So the indulgent dessert was a rich chocolate cake, and the healthy dessert was a fruit platter. And we found that when they were eating with friends, they were more likely to choose the chocolate cake. But when they were eating with strangers or eating alone, then they were more likely to choose the fruit platter.
Wow, how about that? And I wonder if I could try something out on you. A friend of mine who's a chef has to work on Thanksgiving. He's got to feed a whole lot of people at his restaurant. And they always make lots of pies, pumpkin pie, apple pie, blueberry pie, that sort of thing. But they also make a baked Alaska. And he reports that when people go out to his restaurant, he says they see this year after year, when they go out to his restaurant to have lunch, they don't have the pie. They have the baked Alaska, which is arguably slightly less sweet. Does that actually bear out what you're saying? I mean, if there's just 2 of you, say, and you're going out to a restaurant for a nice meal, and you turn down the pie, is that because the element of nostalgia is less?
Probably, but because I assume that the Palaska will be something that is a bigger serving and that could be shared with another person. So the effect will be, in a way, I think, consistent with what I mentioned earlier.
Well, I think I better mind my own business. But it's so nice to have you with us, Professor Kay, and thank you for all these lovely conversations about dessert.
Likewise. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. All the best. Bye-bye.